So good afternoon, everyone. Um, we may get more people. Am I the host now, Dwayne, or are you still the host?
I'm still the host. I will help you like letting the students in.
Okay, so welcome to Workforce Institute's workshop. Um, and this is a class and meant as an introduction to UI UX, for which we provide a 24-week class. And in this hour, you'll just get a grounding in what UX is about. UX is about a lot of things. And I'll introduce you to some of the roles and the careers available and how those roles fit into the UX process. And the UX process is what we follow to make this a user experience design process, to make products that have good UX and UI. And you'll learn all the pieces that make up UX. I'm Mark Richmond, and I'm the lead instructor for Workforce Institute. And I've been around UX for 20 years. I came down to Georgia from New York City in 2002 to attend a human-computer interaction master's program at Georgia Tech. And I didn't go back in 2 years because I met my wife down here, and we're married and we live here in Atlanta. And
write this down.
I've
160
had,
a day. Okay.
in class. There she is. Okay, anything else as far as introductory wise, guys? Or we're good to go? Okay, so can everybody reveal themselves? I'd love to look at rooms and not just names. Hi, Araceli.
Araceli, yes.
Perfect. And where are you coming in from?
Actually, I'm part of the team. I'm an admissions advisor here at Workforce Institute.
Okay, great. Valentina, Jamie, and Johnny, can you turn on your cameras or? Okay, but can you guys just say hi? It'd be great if you could tell us a little bit about what you think you might want to get into the UX world, or what you think you might want to learn, or just what it's about. So Valentina, can you unmute?
She's responding on the chat.
Okay. Okay. All right, but if you could, Dwayne, can they speak? I mean, I know they can talk, but are they allowed to unmute?
Yeah,
I think it's
they are
just
allowed.
she's not in a place to
Oh, I
speak, I
see.
guess.
Okay, great. Okay, so she'd like to learn UX as a new career. She's exploring new options. Johnny, anything to say about UX? Okay, well, you can always unmute and join. And we also have Jamie and Maritza. So okay, Johnny, he's done a BBA. So is that business administration? That's what that is, I guess. Looking forward to learn UX as a new career. Okay, Valentina, we got it. You're outside. Jamie? Okay, Maritza, can you give us a little insight into what you're looking forward to learning as far as UX goes? Welcome, Tiago, same thing. Okay. Well, for some reason, we're not getting, you can always unmute yourselves on Zoom. There's a mic in the lower left if you're on the desktop, and you can just click on that and it should allow you to speak. Otherwise, you can just join the chat and tell us what you're thinking about as far as UX goes. Okay, there's Maritza. Okay, great. Okay. So Maritza's at a possible transition point. Okay, so I'm going to continue with the work, and I'm going to share my screen. And if you have any questions for me, you can either put them on the chat, or I'll leave the chat open here so I can see them. And Dwayne, I need screen share.
Yeah, Mark, just once.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so Jamie's in New York and New Jersey, and great. And I'm going to share the desktop, and let's see how that works. That is perfect. Okay, so let's, okay. So first we'll review some of the roles that are available in UX, the more common roles. So actually I have a pretty good slide that kind of shows what UX is, what people think it is. And let me just see if I saved that by itself recently. No, why don't we just dive straight to this? So you can see there's a cartoon of a UX practitioner, UX designer. And here are some of the top skills they're talking about that people have. One is prototyping. And I'm hoping you guys know what a prototype is, but if you don't, it's a simulated product. We haven't built it yet. We haven't spent the time and money to code it, but we've simulated the product so people can use it. And all they have to be able to use is enough for us to test the product. And what we're doing testing for is to learn whether our iteration, whether our version of the product is something that people can successfully use. If we have all the right information there, is this going to be a good product? Is it something that people can use? This is a big part of the UX journey, and we'll get into that a little more later. Visual design is something that everybody knows about, making things look good. This is really on the UI side, but it's been a skill that a lot of UX designers have necessarily had to acquire. Especially less sophisticated companies often combine UX and UI designers into a single, want a single person to do both of those types of work. And research, and we'll talk a lot about research, but what the U in UX is user, and what we want to know is what are our users' needs, goals, and pain points. And if I had you all on mic, I would have you repeat it. So silently repeat it: needs, goals, and pain points. And if you ever get a UX question you can't answer, just say that. Maybe it'll be a good answer, but that's our mantra. I'm going to skip this most desired skill. This is probably something that designers wish they could do, but it's not that important for you guys. This background, it's kind of meaningless. These are the best, perhaps the best backgrounds to enter the UX field, but people from all walks of life, journalists, musicians. I had a guy who was a plumber, a bartender, psychologist, certainly, all these types of people can enter UX. So these or communications, right? A communications degree or a psych degree, those are really good backgrounds, but people come from everywhere. Regular activities, prototyping, which we discussed. By the way, welcome Picasso and Jasmine. Constructing user journeys. User journeys are a very popular deliverable these days, and that really tracks the user's interaction with a company. For instance, I spent a lot of time at Delta Airlines, so a user journey for somebody with Delta might be starting from planning their trip. What types of resources do they use to plan where to go? Maybe they look things up on the internet. Maybe they talk to their friends or family. Or, maybe they're scanning material put out by Delta. 2, how do they choose a flight? And they might go to the Delta site. They might go to an aggregator like Travelocity or Google Travel or Kayak. What types of information do they need to get to the airport and get on the plane? Delta needs to be providing that. In the in-airport experience, maybe the Delta gate has some material that they can watch or where they can learn more about their trip. Even on the flight, Delta has a popular app where you can kind of see what you're flying over at the moment. The Delta magazine may have good tips that are optimized, that are applicable to the trip they're taking. And the Delta website or app may still have travel itineraries. They may have links to things they can do and look at once they get to their destination. So these are all ways that Delta could help the user with their trip. And the user journey really maps out all those points. If anybody can answer, does a user journey sound like an easy thing to do? Does it sound like something you knock off in a half hour or something that might take a couple of weeks to a couple of months? And it all depends on how good you make it. And good ones take a month or so. But even just guessing, even without a great deal of research, just constructing a user journey can help you think about your application, your product more critically. And that's always good. Contribute to design systems and style guides. These are mostly visual references. What are the colors Delta uses? What are the fonts we use? Where can the logo be? How can it be? What are the different sizes it can be? But in addition to just the visuals, what colors do colors and fonts, you might include interactions here. There might be things like when do you use drop downs? What's the preferred way to show navigation on the different types of devices? So there may be interaction patterns in addition to visual help. And of course, designing visuals, which is visual design. So, and at the bottom here is a very important company, the NN Group. And the two N's are Nielsen Norman. Nielsen is Jakob. Most people say Jacob, but it's Jakob Nielsen. And he's an older usability guru. He's a big guy with how to make things usable and easy to use. The second N is Norman for Don Norman, and he actually named user experience. He was, I think he was the head of design at Apple for a while. He's a professor, and he's one of the leading practitioners of UX. So these are the skills you may need. And here are the roles that are really available. So UX, when I got out of school, People didn't know what we did really, but they knew they needed us because their products weren't working well, and they gave us a try. And I learned a lot about research and a lot about design in school at Georgia Tech, but I didn't learn visual design. And luckily at that time, I was able to thrive without doing visual design. We had a great visual designer on our team at Delta. So I was able to do research, communicate with the rest of the team and our stakeholders, and do the design of the tasks and the navigation. Now things are more segregated. The field is mostly segregated into research and design. In larger companies and in more sophisticated user UX companies, and in places like design firms and consultancies, you can pretty much carve out whatever job you like using the skills that you have. But in many companies, designers do all kinds of design, which would be interaction design and visual design, and we'll talk about the differences in a minute. And researchers do research and also supervise usability tests. User researchers learn about user needs and goals and pain points too, by conducting interviews, doing usability tests, researching competitors, and also maybe doing surveys and watching people work. But really, I speak to my friends who are user researchers. What do you do all day? I interview and I do usability tests. Those are really the most frequent tasks we do. And we'll look at projects, we'll look at the UX process, and you'll see where those fit in. Information architects, this is really a subset of researchers. And what are they concerned with? They're concerned with navigation and wayfinding. So can anyone speak on mic? Can someone turn off their mute and just say hi so I can direct some questions to at least some people? I know many of us can't talk right now. Okay, well, you can always use the chat. I'm going to ask some questions. Does anybody use, okay, so I'm guessing that everybody's probably used Amazon.com once or twice in their lives, and that always turns our assistant on. What does Amazon do when you're looking at a product?
Is an American multinational technology company focusing on e-commerce,
Echo,
cloud
stop.
computing, online advertising,
Alexa, stop.
digital streaming, and artificial intelligence. It has been referred to
Amazon,
as
stop. Good. To help you get around the site or to help you figure out what to buy. Anybody? You can put it in the chat. I'm going to give you 30 seconds.
Gives you suggestions. And suggestions
Yes.
on what you can.
Right. How are those phrased usually?
I don't know. I never really pay attention, but I'm a big shopper at Amazon.
People.
But maybe like you might like this, or
Yes.
based on your shopping experience.
Yes. People who looked at this product also looked at this, or people who bought this product also bought that. Is that helpful? It's helpful for Amazon. Is it helpful for you? Yeah. So those are navigation aids. Those aren't what you think of as traditional navigation, which on the web is usually menus at the top of the screen. And on mobile is usually menus at the bottom of the screen, or what we call a hamburger menu, which are those funny looking 3-bar things that pull down. They look like hamburgers. So information architects, that's what they're concerned with, navigation. They use tools like card sorts. We won't learn about those today, but it's a specialized, very easy form of research to help learn how users group tasks and the language they use. We might look at search logs and competitors to see what works well. Certainly we're looking at competitors to see what works well, but we also want to see the terminology used. Maybe Delta Airlines talks about some things on their website, and they use internal language that people at Delta know, but people in the rest of the world maybe don't understand. And maybe when we look at competitor products, we'll see how they phrase things and learn something. And we also look at the search logs to see how people phrase things when they got on the site. Maybe we'll change the way we describe things. Unsurprisingly, I think the premier and the guy who's the big information architect in the country is working on grocery stores. And as you can imagine, things like cereal aisle and yogurt, these are things that are really overwhelming to look at. You can find what you want in the store. So those are research skills. Those are the basic research categories. And then we come to design. So when we got out of school, we were all called information architects, but that's not what we were. We were interaction designers. And what do? We design the page-by-page flow. So that's how people move from one screen to another, either on web or on mobile. And we design the actual screens that the users follow in a website or app. Do we design the final screens? Well, maybe. It's always the visual designer who does the final screen, but we may also be the visual designer, as I mentioned before. So what do? We build wireframes. I probably spent 60 to 70% of my time in UX working on wireframes, because every screen pretty much had a wireframe. And let me show you a picture of a wireframe. So well, there are different types of wireframes, but here's a very low fidelity wireframe. Can everybody see? I hope you guys can see this. You should be able to. And you'll see this just looks like a block layout. There's some header here, some text, maybe some subheading, and some text. And maybe there's 3 things that you can buy, or 3 tasks you can do, or places you can go down here. And this might be some sort of navigation. As we get a little more comfortable, here's kind of what the screen's going to look like. The wireframes usually are black and white. We have the active section highlighted here, but that may not be the color we use ultimately. This is just to show something. And we can see that area on the left was actually chapters. So this is a book. And then there's a section within that chapter, and that's where we are, blah, blah, blah. And here's some different topics that we can choose, or subtopics. And finally, a high fidelity wireframe is starting to look like the real thing. So this is what we spend a lot of time doing. And it's not just making it pretty. As a matter of fact, that doesn't have that much to do with it at first. It's really making sure that we put the right information here. People know where to find things. So we're concerned about hierarchy. This is the most important thing here, and these things are important. Here's where the navigation is going to go. Here's where the search bar went, at least at this point in time. Hierarchy, completeness of the information so that people can do things. And I'm going to continue by going back to the other screen, which was here. We're experts in using the right objects or widgets to help users best accomplish tasks. When do we put something in a drop down? When do we use radio buttons? When is it a text box? Where's the label in the text box? Is it inside the text box? Is it on top? Is it to the left? Why? We know these things. We've either gotten book knowledge or experiential knowledge, or we've read things online about them, and we know the strategy to do that. We know that these days, and you probably all know this intuitively by now, that your profile in a website is usually at the top right. And that's usually where the search bar is, and maybe some other fairly critical information. And the logo may be on the left. That may be the home button. back button, things like that. On mobile, the navigation is usually on the bottom, at least the main navigation bar. So that's what interaction designers do. They design the interaction, the flow, and the screen hierarchy, and maybe a rough layout. The visual designers who understand the company's branding needs, create the colors, graphics, and final page layouts, make it look great, and they're going to be the final arbiters of what it looks like. And the interaction designers and the visual designers will consult on what's most important. Visual designers may show that in their wireframes. Interaction designers may show that in their wireframes. So the visual designers can pick up from there and they say, okay, we need to highlight this. This is how I usually highlight things on this web product or on this app. So that's how we'll do it. And finally, there are product designers. And if you've looked at ads for UX people, I think they're overwhelmingly, the title that they're looking for is product designer. And that may mean different things in different companies, but it usually means a combination of interaction and visual designer. It's a visual designer who understands how to read research from the researchers, how to lay out a page so that it's not only visually clean, but also easy to use, and knows how to prototype. Are there any questions? Unfortunately, if you guys aren't talking, just throw any questions into the chat. So these are the 5 roles, but we're talking researcher, information architects, very specialized type of researcher, only really concerned with global navigation and maybe navigation within the site. Interaction designers design the flow and the screens. Visual designers make it beautiful and make it match the brand guidelines. And product designers are just a generic term for interaction and visual design. So now I'm going to scare everybody. And here's the UX process. And UX is a mutt. UX borrows from many different disciplines: research, psychology, cultural studies, what's it called? I'm blanking for a second here. Visual design, certainly, graphics, industrial design, communication techniques. And all those skills are part of this UX process. There's basically 5 steps, or maybe 4 steps. There's usually some sort of kickoff meeting where you learn about what you're going to build. The stakeholder or your client or your boss or your partners, talk about and tell you what we're going to build and why. The discover phase, can anybody guess what you do in the discover phase? Once again, we're not going to get vocal, so I'm going to answer that. So this is when we do research, and mostly user research, also competitive research. There's a very amorphous kind of stage in the middle, which is usually called define, but we're also evaluating. And what this stage is, we're summing up what we learned during this discover phase in the research. We may share a research report. We are certainly going to create some artifacts. I hope some of you have heard of personas, and we talked about user journeys earlier. And there are other things. And we're creating these things to give people documentation and kind of shortcuts to that documentation, either maps or personas, so they can learn what we learned without going through research reports. Personas in this definition are combinations of different types of users. And I'll give an example here. Suppose we're building an HR system, human resource system. Well, we know there are going to be three types of users using this. There are going to be HR professionals who have to use it to set somebody up when they're hired by the company. There are going to be managers who need that to keep track of their direct reports and probably evaluate them and recommend them for promotions or whatever, honors, or say, hey, we really need to watch this person because they're not doing their job that well. So there are managers using it, and of course there are employees using it. That's how they get paid. Maybe they change their information if their address changes. Certainly they get their evaluations, like maybe they can read them on the site. And maybe there are ways to apply for education or for to go to a conference, for instance, or get money to attend a meeting somewhere, or because they need to get travel funds. So we know of three basic types of personas. And those are our very early personas. We know there's three types of users, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Here, we've done some research. We may have interviewed people, may have tested them. We may have watched them work. Now we know something more about them, and we can really create personas that have more meaning. Maybe there are 5 different types of employees. There are those who work remotely and don't come into the office at all and they need certain tools that perform certain types of jobs. And maybe they have a different need for that HR system than the people who come in every day. Maybe they need that HR system to tell them, for instance, where I can sit today, because a lot of companies don't have assigned permanent seating. Maybe there are other things they need from that system. Maybe there are employees who are always traveling. There are salespeople who are on the road. There are other types of employees. So what we're going to do is refine those rough groups of managers, employees, and HR people into, hey, this is Janelle. She always works remotely. She needs access to yada, da, da, da. The tools she uses are this, that, and the other thing. And when she logs on to this HR system, what she really wants to see is information about travel plans, the updates to her, to any travel information, the latest guidelines for people working remotely. And then there's Fred, and maybe Fred goes into the office every day. And he doesn't need that stuff. He needs different things. So by having these personas are really groups, a simulated person who combine a certain similar set of characteristics. The whole group of people who work remotely and they have these needs. There's a whole group of people who work in the office, they have these needs. And then there's this other type of people who work remotely and they have these needs. So we give them names and we include those goals, needs, and pain points in our persona. And we share these with the team. Why? So that when you design your system and you say, well, this is important and we need this at this time, the developers may say, well, that's all well and good, but it's not that easy for us to do. Why do we need this? And you would say, because Fred needs it. And they all know who Fred is because you've distributed the personas and they use those as part of their design documentation. So they're a very important deliverable. Once again, back to this define phase, we're taking what we learned in the research phase, turning it into some artifacts to share with people. And we're also starting to plan the design. At this point, we kind of know how the design should flow. And maybe our information architect or the researcher who does this says, okay, I've done my testing with people, and here's what the navigation should look like. Here's our top navigation. Here's the subcategories. And here's the language we're going to use. So we're starting to plan design. We're not doing the individual screen design yet. We're just doing the groundwork with the global aspects of the product. Who are the users? What's the global navigation going to look like? What's the rough flow for the system? So then we come to the big kahuna, design. And as you see, I have ideate, prototype, test, and you may notice down here, it also says ideate, prototype, test. Anybody care to share what ideate is? Luke, can you unmute or no? Or anybody care in the type in the chat what they think ideate means? So, of course, ideate is generating ideas. So this is, we're going to come up with the ideas for what screens we need, how things should flow, which we've already started. How users will flow through a task, the individual tasks. So we're starting to design the individual screens, and we're designing the flow through the task. And first, we may start by sketching. We may show those sketches to potential users, but most likely we're going to show them to our coworkers, other people on the team, hopefully other user experience designers. And they'll give us feedback, and we'll refine these early sketches. At that time, we may create wireframes. And we looked at wireframes. Wireframes are basically a blueprint of how the screen will look, not the final design. Early on, wireframes could just be hand-drawn. I actually recommend you do that. But it's easy to use a tool to build wireframes. And some of you are familiar with Photoshop. Photoshop's a little bit of overkill for creating wireframes. These days, the main programs that we use are something called Figma, which Adobe just bought, Adobe XD, which is Adobe Experience Design, and Sketch. But Figma is really overwhelmingly the tool of choice. It has over 70, probably over 80% of the market right now. And there are other ones that are great. There's one called Just in Mind. There's one called, anyway, there's one that makes things deliberately look sketchy. They don't look like they're perfect. They look like they're hand-drawn. I just can't remember its name right now. And there's another one called Axure, A-X-U-R-E, which is really great for building prototypes. So there's a lot of prototyping wireframing tools, and most of those allow you to build prototypes as well. So the section here is called Ideate, Prototype, Test. So we're going to do some sketching, build some wireframes, use the wireframes to create prototypes. And you can even just use those wireframes as paper and have people look at a paper screen or a drawing, and you say, hey, you're just coming into this system and this is the home page. What can you do here? What are you going to do? What do you think you should click on? You can't click, but you can tap with your finger on the piece of paper. Do you understand what we're trying to put forward here? Do things look like they're in the right place? Are things the right size? Are they in the right sequence? You can learn a lot about how people will approach or approve or disapprove of the current design, or may find it easy to use or difficult to use, just based on the sketches you do. And not that many companies use paper for this. I'm a big advocate of it, but it's very easy to create wireframes digitally with the tools I mentioned before. The difference is if you have paper wireframes or things that just look hand-drawn, people may be a little less intimidated by them if you're testing them. One thing we hear a lot of people say when we test them is, oh, I should have known that. Yeah, that was my mistake. Oh, I should have, I didn't, I'm just not that good at this. Was it really their mistake? Or was our product not helping them? It's the product's fault. It's not your fault. Unless, if you can't read and there's text that's written, well, maybe. But we don't want people to be intimidated by the visual appearance of the product at this time. We don't want the product to look so professional that people say, oh, that product must be good, because we don't know if it's good yet. We haven't even tested it. But we're going to use those prototypes, paper or digital, to test users. And that's what this cycle is: ideate, prototype, test. This is an iterative cycle. I'm assuming people know what iterative means, but at the same time, I'm going to pretend I think you don't know what it means. I'm going to say, we do this cycle over and over. Not unusual to go through this 5 or 6 times, even 10 or 20 times. And each time, when we test, we learn things that don't work well, things that do work well, things that we didn't cover enough, things that we did cover enough. And we go back, do some more sketching, usually, or do some more wireframing, probably, create another prototype, or just use the wireframes, and test again. And we do that over and over. And this is really the UX difference. Design, as it went before user experience, I mean, some companies did this, where they would bring users in and test them. I'm sure most people have been part of focus groups where they kind of test movies or products and see if people like the idea. Well, this is kind of like that for a software product. But it's not just whether you like the idea or you think you'll buy it. We're going to see how you use it and make improvements based on that. And it's not going to cost us development. It's not going to be as expensive as developing these products. We're going to develop simulations with our prototypes. So you see 3 different processes here. And I'm going to let you in on a secret, which is they're all the same thing with different terminologies. When I came up in the early 2000s, user-centered design was the process we all used. And these were pretty much the steps. I'm not going to talk about rollout. Rollout not always done anymore because we do a lot of building right within the design cycle. So this was our process, UCD, and we all learned user-centered design, and that was great. About 10 years ago, design thinking somehow became a meme. It just became hot. In the same way as the word UX or user experience got hot around 2012 or so, around 2015, 2016, 2017, design thinking was the hot guy of the moment. And every company said, we need design thinking. It's the same thing. Instead of discover, they call it empathize. Instead of define or evaluate, they call it define. Empathize, learn about your audience. Define, construct the point of view based on user needs. Construct the artifacts, the personas, the journey maps, the user flows, what do people need to do? How are they going to do it? Ideate, prototype, test. Sounds great. Double Diamond, which is really a British-based system, I believe. I believe it was built just in the UK. Discover. We've seen that. Define. We've seen define. Develop. We haven't seen that before. It may not be the best term, but it's the same thing. And deliver, which is kind of building. And this no longer fits that well because develop also includes building it these days. That's something you don't desperately need to know right now, but if we have a minute, we'll talk about that. The one thing you see here is there are two diamonds, up and down. And what do those mean? One going up means it's a divergent stage. So diverge is do lots of different things. Try to do different discovery methods. Maybe do user interviews. If you have access, watch real people work with a product or without a product. Go into people's homes and watch them plan trips. Watch them mop their floor. The Swiffer was developed as something called partly contextual inquiry. Researchers went into people's homes and watched them mop their floors. Does that sound like fun? Then you'll be a researcher. Test users on the existing app. Do those card sorts, look at the information architecture. And these are some of the things that come out of that. But same thing, empathize, learn about your audience. Define, construct point of view based on user needs, personas, journey maps, research report. Share your research with your client, with your boss, with your stakeholders. And if things work out wonderfully, you will have gotten some requirements early on in the kickoff. We're going to build this HR system. We needed to add people to it so we can assign job training to them, so we can find them a cubicle, so we can get their drug tests or whatever. Great. Okay, so we're going to build an HR system that does all these things. Then we have some time to learn about the people using it, and we found out that we have 5 different types of employees, 3 different types of managers, and we'd have good old HR people, and there's really only one flavor there. But we also learned by talking to those HR people that they need something else. They need a quick add. We need to be able to add people to this system in 15 minutes so that we could start ordering training, drug tests, get their bank, talk to their banks to get the information or allow them to do that. There are these things that we need to set off. So we need a quick add. We don't need to add to every piece of information about the person at this time, just some key things. Now, as a user experience researcher, you may have learned that, and you bring it up to your stakeholder or your client at this time, and they say, wow, Maritza, you really are helping this product because we didn't imagine this. So your research really did the trick for us. And we're going to incorporate that into the product. So this may be a revised product roadmap. And it may be a new role for Maritza. Maybe they were so impressed with that they make Maritza the chief experience officer, and she gets her own office and a big raise, and she lives happily forever after. That's your big opportunity here, is that research can generate more information about the people who are going to use your product and their goals, needs, and pain points so that we can design a great product. Design, okay. So discover is a divergent step, do lots of different discoveries. Define is more of a convergent step. Take what we learn, give us a new roadmap, give us a good problem description, what we're solving, create the personas, narrow down these 20 people we interviewed to 3 or 4 different personas that we can share with the team. So it's convergent, diverge, converge. Design is divergent. Try lots of different sketches. Try to imagine 3 completely different ways to build your system. You won't always get time to do that, but I like to try to do that. And by making it a very wide range of solutions, you're able to borrow the best from each solution. You can show your stakeholders different things and they'll say, wow, I like this from solution 1, I like this from solution 2, and this from solution 3. Can you put that together for me? And you say, I'll try. And then deliver is, you're ultimately, and you even converge within this step, because you may start out with 3 different prototypes and you wind your way down to one final prototype that you refine and make better and better. So that's converging. I didn't talk about kickoff, but that's when you're told what you need to do. One thing we do during kickoff is talk to the stakeholders. And if we're UX people or UI people, we want to learn not only what the system needs to do, but what's the stakeholder's vision? Does the client use some other products? Maybe they use Airbnb or Kayak or something, where some feature of that product or something that works well in that product, they think would work well in this system. So what we want to know is not just the nuts and bolts of what are we going to build, but how do you think about it? You've lived with this for a long time. Ms. Stakeholder, I want your opinion. I'm not saying we'll build it that way, but we want you on board. We'll have those proto personas, which in this HR system was just HR professional, employee, and manager. So we use those to ask for research time in our discover stage. Where do information architects fit into this picture? Anybody? I know. Okay. So that's here, late in the discover stage into the define stage, where we build and where we just create the navigation. We're not building the product yet. Designers spend most of their time in this design phase, ideate, prototype, test. A little bit of time here in the define, evaluate stage. That's pretty much it. The UX world is largely split up into researchers and designers these days. Jobs in research may be general researcher, where you do a lot of interviewing and a lot of, you oversee the usability testing. So in research, you're not just in the discover phase and the define, but you're in the design phase because you're the one who probably supervises and executes the usability test. And you build that in conjunction with your designer, but you're in charge of that. Designers, mostly in this design phase. That's what you might do. And I want questions, but so any questions, put them in the chat. This is what I think you really need to know before you get into the UX field. So I guess if you want to learn more about this, we have a 24-week class right now. There may be other alternatives coming in the future, but so Dwayne, Ramiz, anybody want to contribute?
Nothing from my end, Mark.
Okay. Well, if I'm not seeing any questions, so I hope that was informative and clear. If there's anything you want me to clarify, we've got 3 minutes left, and I'm happy to do so. All right, so thank you for your time, and I hope you got your. I hope this was a useful introduction to user experience and UI. Dwayne,
Okay,
I'm
Mark.
turning it
Yeah,
over to you.
yeah, sure. All I would say thanks, Mark. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
If there's any question, anything, I have sent the links for the form. So once your guys fill out the form, you will receive your certificate. Okay, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Bye-bye.